Welcome to another sparkling edition of Plank of the Week. It missed out last week for the first time ever because I took a week off and we couldn't work out what else to do other than to run it into this week and have a sort of a double Plank of the Week award. So it's actually Plank of the Fortnight. I've got the plank here and I'm delighted to say that I'm in the company of some people who have done this before. Emma Webb is here, who is of course Conservative commentator, frequent guest on Plank of the Week. Kevin O'Sullivan, Talk Radio's very own hard man, is also here. He's also been on Plank of the Week many, many times. We're coming up towards the end of the year, by the way, and there will be a list made available of all those who have appeared the most on Plank of the Week. And I think, Kevin, you're up there as one of those who's been here the most. Now, I'm going to make no apology for the fact that a couple of my nominations actually come from last week because they're so good that I don't want to let them off the hook. But I'm not going to go first. I'm going to let Emma kick us off. So, Emma, give us your first nomination.
So it's President Erdogan.
And he
Turkey.
probably hasn't figured, I don't think. I'm pretty sure he has not figured before, President of Turkey. Why particularly is it blank this week? So
he hasn't stopped opening his mouth all week. And he's got this kind of caliph complex. Yeah. He said some pretty abhorrent things about France, which I think you could consider abetting some of the violence that's happened since. But in addition to that, he's also shown himself to be just ridiculously oversensitive. Yeah. So
which for a dictator, which I'm going to call him, frankly, because that's kind of what he is. I mean, he's a sort of benign dictator if you want to compare him to Kim Jong-un, but he's still a dictator, really.
Mediocre. Yeah. And he's trying to sue the Dutch politician Geert Wilders for a cartoon that he had posted online somewhere of Erdogan. I think he was wearing a bomb-shaped hat or something, and it had AKP, the ruling party in Turkey that Erdogan is from, on it. And he's done this a number of times. So he also previously has tried to sue a Turkish doctor for posting a picture comparing him to Gollum. Right. And it's absurd, and he's so oversensitive. They don't like
cartoons, do they? Really don't.
No, and so it started at the beginning of this week with all of the offence taken at the Muhammad cartoons, which obviously turned very nasty, and then ended up with Erdogan throwing his toys out the pram again because he doesn't like cartoons of himself being posted online. Right. And so the real reason is because, obviously he likes to prosecute people for insulting the president, which is a crime in Turkey.
Is it a crime?
So I thought, who better to have as my number one plank of the week than somebody who doesn't like to be insulted?
No, I think it's a very good start, an excellent start. In fact, I hope we don't ever get that law here, Kevin, with all the criticism that you and I give to the government.
We'll be behind bars.
You'll be locked up in the scrubs before you can say Jack Robinson or even Tommy Robinson. But tell us what your first one is.
Well, since we're going back 2 weeks, I'm going to go for Marcus Rashford.
Oh, yes.
Who posted on Twitter, out of interest, what does virtue signalling mean? Right. It means what you're doing about starving children. It means that if you want to know what virtue signalling is, Marcus, you should ask all your marketing and PR people that you've hired, your very expensive people that polish up your image. I'm not against the thrust of his campaign to make sure that hungry kids go fed, but I do not accept, it makes me really angry that he and the Labour Party have succeeded in painting this picture of a kind of Dickensian Britain full of sort of Boris Johnson type Scrooges, handing
ladling gruel
Oliver
out.
Twist, more, we want more,
but
like
the trouble is though,
rubbish.
Yeah, but the trouble
rubbish.
is, well, it might well be, but the trouble is the Tories don't help themselves by not really dealing with it properly, instead of actually explaining what they're doing. The fact, it's incredible to me that this Tory government has given away more money than you could shake a stick at. I mean, they've come up with billions and billions and billions of pounds for people who need the money, and they've given more and more money to councils. Every time they lock a council down, they give them even more money.
20 million for
they tell them to help out the people who need help, and yet they've managed to make themselves look like the Scrooge government of all time, which is extraordinary. Yeah, because they're not.
You're totally right. The haplessness of the Tory government in terms of the optics of this free school meal saga has been just dreadful, just absolutely dreadful. But they're useless at that kind of thing. But the proposal that schools should pay for kids' school meals during school holidays when the schools are closed is crazy. We shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, and where does it go after this? Will Marcus Rashford say, "Oh well, we've done school dinners. Shall we do school breakfasts?"
Yeah.
How about 11s?
Well, I mean, it
where
won't
does
stop here. It won't stop here because of all the people who, of course, are virtue signallers. Gary Lineker being the king of them. He answered that tweet by saying, "Oh, I think a virtue signaller is somebody who's not of very good virtue, having a go at somebody who is." So that was his definition, basically, of anyone who's doing something nice. I mean, you're very brave to have a go at Marcus Rashford.
Well, I'm doing it partly for a laugh.
Very few people will ever do it because they're too frightened of what others...
I'm the one who's blame Rashford.
Yeah.
Also, he plays for Man United. I can't stand anyone who plays for Man United.
Well, I mean, that's an understandable hatred.
But to be serious, it is... I am perturbed by this weird veneration that surrounds anyone who does something like this. All of a sudden, he's Saint Marcus. He cares for children, and the Tories
I'm sure he does care for children. But it doesn't do his image any harm either. But also, it has been pointed out as well that he has been with Manchester United since quite a young age. So whether or not he was actually starting, I mean, people have turned it into a political football, if you'll pardon the phrase, because of course. People who then said that he had a bad upbringing and a poor childhood say, well, he was brought up under the Blair government. Well, it's hardly Tony Blair's fault, is it? I mean, you know, the whole business of these kinds of emotive arguments is what's ruining politics in this country, I think.
I agree, and you're exactly right about the emotion of it. And the problem with it, we're now so sort of... romantic and emotional about these kind of issues. Starving children. There aren't very many starving children, by the way.
Well, as many people have pointed out, last month they were all obese, weren't they?
Yeah, but well, exactly. Which crisis are we having this week to do with kids? Is it the obesity one or the hunger one? They don't seem to go together. But what we're talking about with this school meal saga is welfare state mission creep. And if you're not careful, this government, with its obvious tendencies, it's to do with coronavirus, they've got into the habit of handing out more and more money, and school meals will be no exception. So we have to take a stand against this school meals thing. I hope the Tories stay strong on it, because otherwise we're going to have a state that pays for everything, and we're going to have 67 million people basically going to the government, please help me, give me money, feed me. It's a state of mind that is not healthy for this country. So no free school meals for kids in school holidays.
You will now become the hate figure for most people on social media. But
I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing.
Look how much he enjoys it. I'm going to give you my plank, and this one would have been in last week, but continues to be in this week because I keep seeing adverts for it. And it's Borat II, but it's going to be Sacha Baron Cohen, the creator of Borat, a guy who's done a lot of very funny things in his time. Some people don't like him, some people never liked him, but I thought the first Borat film was actually quite funny, and it was quite outrageous, and it was quite tasteless, but it was also something you could laugh at. The second one, which was heralded with some great kind of fanfare, is absolute and utter tosh. Not only is it tasteless and ghastly and not funny at all, but he's turned it into a sort of diatribe against the right wing of America, and he's making fun of ordinary Americans, which he did in the first one, but he somehow didn't do it in quite the same horrible way, and he's turned it into a sort of anti-Trump thing, which includes, I have to say, one of the most horrible kind of reenactments that he's trying to make, which is basically of Donald Trump assaulting his wife, you know, and he's put that in the film, and it's just shocking. And I mean, I don't know why he's had to become suddenly this woke king of the Democratic part of America, because he's supposed to be a comedian, and he ain't funny.
But he was always that way inclined, very liberal, lefty, Hampstead boy.
Yeah, I don't mind your politics if you're funny. He's a comedian.
But can I just say that Borat 2, and probably Borat 1, come to think of it, Borat 2, 100%, not for debate, this is a fact, it's racist.
Yeah.
It's a racist film.
Yeah.
And it's racist about the people of Kazakhstan.
Although the Kazakhstan government have now apparently adopted it and said that it's fine.
But why? Well, that's up to them. But why would you say that? I mean, Sasha, how is your Kazakhstanese, if that's what you call the language? I bet it's not as good as Borat's English, but it proposes that if somebody from a foreign country speaks poor, heavily accented English, then automatically we must laugh at them as if they're total half-wits. That's racism. It's racist. It's a racist film.
It is. And also, as somebody pointed out, if he wanted to make a sort of a film and an investigation and a sort of a piss take, if you like, of Black Lives Matter, how do you think that would go? I don't think he'd be getting any Oscars anytime soon.
No, he'll probably get Oscars for Borat II, won't he?
So Sacha Baron Cohen, definitely my first plank of the week. Emma, down to you again.
My second is Femi.
Yes.
Femi has done a lot this week. He's been very busy on Twitter, as always.
He's very anxious He's very anxious, it seems to me. He's now getting so desperate that he's coming out with some of the most ludicrous stuff I've ever seen.
He even posted a video of himself essentially stalking James Cleverly down the road and harassing him into answering his questions.
Talking about fake
I think he's still pretending to be a teenager. Yeah. The first thing that he did this week...
He must be nearly 40 now, mustn't he? He's still wearing a T-shirt. Yeah. Go on, Femi.
He's the oldest pretend American in the world.
So the first thing he did this week was calling Nigel Farage a death-mongering liar.
Oh, yeah.
The second thing he did was he was
people.
So the second thing that he did was he did a video where he was talking about trying to get people to continue supporting Labour rather than creating a new party.
Now, this is the same Labour Party that refused him entry to it, wasn't it? Because he tried to apply to become a member of the Labour Party and they refused.
He's just too far gone.
Yeah.
Even for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour. And in this video, he was very seriously talking about proportional representation, and then suddenly, like you were saying before, in going back to sort of the Dickensian portrayal of all of the starving children in London, he said that we have a hard right Conservative Party that wants to starve children over Christmas, and that's what the problem is.
His latest tweet today that I saw seemed to suggest that there was something evil and twisted about anyone that wore a poppy. And he was making fun of the BBC and saying, why are the BBC people having to wear poppies? Because surely that's some kind of political statement. So he's trying to, rehash the same debate that the left wants to have every single year when we get into November. Instead of just sitting down and shutting up and saying thank you to the people who actually died for this country or became injured as a result of fighting for this country, let's instead have a debate about, the tyranny of, misogyny over the rest of the world. I mean, do give it up, mate, for heaven's sake.
He described it as a war-related campaign,
yeah,
rather than it being a collective act of remembering, yes, where people are trying to wear the poppy to raise money.
It is related to the wars of the past, isn't it? Yes.
Well, it's also
yes, well done,
it's also
Femi.
To raise money. It's also done to raise money for charities that look after veterans. You know, but only somebody from the left could see that as a problem.
So he says that this is justification. He thinks, rather than saying that the BBC shouldn't wear the poppy, he thinks that they should wear, presumably, Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ.
I mean, he really is now at the point of sort of just putting in a box, isn't he? And just saying, look, just stay over there, please. Unfortunately, people keep giving him the opportunity to appear. People say to me, why don't you get Femi back on? I'm never getting him on my show. I wouldn't give him the publicity. He was on it once, proved himself to be a complete moron, had never heard of the Balkans War, didn't know anything about the European Union. And his answer to every question is, I've studied EU law. Yeah. And you go, well, that's great. Yeah. Brilliant.
One question, Femi. How come you're wrong about absolutely everything? Yes. I mean, he always backs the losers. Why don't the left do very well politically? Because they never win.
Yeah.
They're always
because nobody actually wants to
wrong.
vote for all the things that they want to do.
That's the thing he was saying about proportional representation. A classic EU activist who thinks, well, we can't play by the current rules, so we need to change the rules.
He's obsessed with that,
so that they can get it right this time.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about proportional representation was the last time we had an election for the European Parliament, guess who became the biggest party in Brussels? The Brexit Party.
Yes.
So I mean, that's what proportional representation will do for Femi.
Yeah, but you're right, he's obsessed with proportional representation, and he talks as if it's at the forefront of all the debate.
Yeah, we lost that. He lost that referendum as well.
No one is talking about it, Femi, except you.
But also, if you remember, you probably don't remember because it was so boring. But I remember we had a referendum about the EV voting system or something, didn't we?
Another referendum that they want to redo. They're obsessed with us.
Which they also lost.
Right?
Yeah. Let's have your second one.
My second one is epidemiologists on the basis that...
Easy for you to say.
I've never trusted...
There's a lot of them.
I've never trusted grown-ups who make models, and they're called epidemiologists. Right. Their models don't work. I mean, I could go the easy route and... cite in particular, of course, Professor the bonking boffin Neil Ferguson, the man.
Balance and Whitty are coming not far behind.
Well, so I thought, well, I'll just get them all together, all epidemiologists and their stupid little models that don't work, that have plunged this country into absolute crisis. It is due to these idiots' models that were in all this trouble. And that models, they never come true. Neil Ferguson has been reliably wrong on everything since 2002, when he was personally responsible for the horrific murder and incineration of millions of innocent farm animals to stop a foot and mouth epidemic that never ever happened and was never in danger of happening.
Were we supposed to catch foot and mouth? Was that the thing?
Well, no, it was that it was going to spread through the country. As soon as someone...
So it was going to kill all the animals, right?
Well, yeah.
So this is where they should have realised that this bloke is actually a psychopath, right? Because here's his reasoning. His reasoning is, I'll tell you what, right? We've got to stop this horrible disease ripping through the animal community and killing all the animals. So here's my plan. We'll kill all the animals before they get killed by the virus.
Good job that he got that out of his system the first time round.
But he sort of did he?
Yeah,
and that's the thing.
Yeah, maybe this is him sort of on the rebound.
The reason we are in this mess now is due to that bonking boffin that breaks his own rules.
Well, and China, to be fair.
But
I mean, him
whispering into Boris's ears, 500,000 will die. It was never going to be 500,000. And for some reason, BBC continues to wheel out this utterly discredited, always wrong boffin to spew more of his rubbish.
Mind you, not as bad as... Did you see that report last night on Liverpool that they did on the BBC News? Unbelievable. I can't remember who their medical correspondent is. He's got a very forgettable name. But he did this... It was almost like it was a sort of a kind of frontline, protest from the BBC to say, look, this is all terrible. What they didn't mention, of course, is that the number of infections seems to be dropping in Liverpool at the moment. All they had was this kind of tale of doom and gloom and how it was all going to be a terrible situation, and it was like this kind of final dispatch from the front line. Unbelievable.
The thing is, though, I agree. So Whitty and Valance, they're cut from exactly the same cloth as Neil Ferguson and all the members of SAGE, and they are enthralled to their own stupid models that don't work. I'm convinced that in years to come, epidemiology will be like eugenics. It will be a completely discredited science that we'll look back on and say, Christ, why on earth did we ever listen to this stupid men with silly models?
Do you know what worries me is that what we've discovered through this is that actually epidemiologists have been running the government for years, and everything that they do and all the policy that they come up with is based on these models, right? I remember talking to my sister, who you know, Kevin, who works in the commodities business, right? And as computers, after the sort of the crashes of Wall Street in the 80s, computers started to take over, and the very smart people started to work on models of all sorts of possible outcomes,
algorithms, and models,
because in the old days, a bit like Fleet Street, you worked on your nerves basically, and if you were in a trading room, you were selling and buying copper and steel and gold and whatever on the basis of what you thought was going to happen, and people were making a fortune, losing a fortune. She had this young sort of inventor type came in, geeky character, who had done a model apparently of what was going to happen to the price of copper over the course of the next 24 months, right? And she said to him, after he'd run through this amazing model sort of, explanation and said, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, she was like, what do you think will happen if the workers in Chile go on strike? Because they do that quite a lot in the copper mines. And he went, what? And she said, well, presumably it would affect the price because the supply would obviously be curtailed. He said, that's not in the model. And she went, well, you better put it in the model because that's what happens at least once every 15 months, And this is the problem, that you're dealing with these characters who haven't been in the real world. They don't know
and
anything.
a government that talks about the science, as if there is such a thing as the science, and it's absolutely watertight.
People say you've got to listen to the science. Well, which science? Is it the epidemiologists that don't forget, to their credit, in my view, there are lots of epidemiologists who don't think lockdowns are necessary. They think they're an evil that is bad for the society that we all live in, and they're building their models to prove their case. Meanwhile, Ferguson and Whitty and Valance build their models to prove their case. And as you say, Emma, proves that the idea that we should listen to experts, always trust is nonsense, because experts never agree.
But the trouble is, it does work on some sections of society, because people will sometimes argue with me and say, what's the matter? Don't you believe in facts because you're a right-winger? And you go, well, actually, something that's going to happen in the future isn't a fact, I'm afraid. That's a prediction.
Which science do we listen to? You're exactly right.
I think advisors should advise, the government should govern, and the government have just ceased to govern because they are focusing on the science kind of monomaniacally.
But what was clear on Saturday, I think there were two things terrifying Boris. And Boris, by the way, is completely now motivated by blind terror. He's a quivering wreck who's scared of his own shadow. I don't think he's
sleeping much, do you?
No, he's not. He looked terrible on Saturday. But two things terrified him. One, I think, was the prospect of the end of the furlough scheme. 2 million suddenly out of work, right. Suddenly unemployed, literally. Come Monday, so he wanted to extend that. Secondly, it was that Whitty and Valance and Sage have quite clearly said to him, you go against what we say, fine, you make the decision. We will denounce you as the man who ignored the science and killed thousands of Brits. He's terrified of that.
And because there's a chance of that,
they've got him in a vice-like
room. He can't move.
It's why there can't be an exit plan, because how can you wriggle out of this once you've committed to the science? There's no way that you can get out of those shackles.
Well, what is he going to do on December the 2nd? You know, he's busy now because he's trying to cover the backbenchers who want to revolt against him, not because they're going to beat him in the vote, you know, on Wednesday. It's just that he doesn't want to have all these people that hate him, because he must. I mean, this is the worst nightmare for Boris. He wants to be the most popular Prime Minister of all time, and he's fast becoming the most unpopular.
Yeah, but he's got COVID monomania. You know, they're absolutely myopic about COVID, this government. You know, we know this. There are 18 conditions that kill more people than COVID. You know, 99.5% of people who get COVID-19 will recover. The death rate is still vanishingly small in a population of 67 million. Why is this government absolutely fixated on this one not particularly virulent condition? It's bizarre.
And there's so much else going on. It's just such a monumental cock-up from Boris. It's like, you know, putting out these statements that are complete platitudes about what's happened today in Vienna, what has been happening in France. They're just completely ignoring all of the things that they should be focusing on.
And then
just because of this.
To go back to epidemiologists as well, of course, their great crime on Saturday was to fuel Boris with this nonsense that 4,000 people a day would die by Christmas.
It was already
and it turns out that if it was ever remotely true, the data they used was 4 weeks old and irrelevant. But clearly, they're plucking numbers out of the ether to scare us.
Also, they were willfully removing parts of the graph, the famous heat graph, the heat table that they put out, right? Look at all this bit over here, it's all dark. They forgot to give us the first part of the heat graph, which showed that up to half of the hospitals in England don't actually have any COVID patients at all.
The tragedy of those two, the two Ronnies of Doom, Valance and Whitty, the tragedy of them is when they're going, slide please, heat graphs, look at this, look at this, that goes up at the end. But they actually think people are understanding what they're saying. It's like everyone's going, oh, what the hell are they on about? It is just to bamboozle us.
They really are losing the plot altogether, and people are just fed up with it.
Yeah, they really
are going, I don't think this particular second lockdown will be as successful as the first one, because lots of people won't do anything.
I don't believe the polls either. I do not believe 72% of the population want more lockdown.
No.
They really don't.
I don't know who they're asking. But I think
if they are asking, they're saying, if it was to save the life of millions of people, would you support another lockdown?
Well, I must tell you, and we can answer the same thing. I mean, you're in the business of sort of political discourse on a daily basis. We're just, hacks. But I mean, I've never been asked by YouGov anything. Have you?
No.
Ever been polled by YouGov?
I was polled once about, and it was a poll on behalf of the Green Party, and I was stopped in the street and asked them, would you vote for the Green Party? I said, would you vote for the Green Party? I said, I don't really think so, no. He said, well, let me ask you this. Do you support us having nuclear weapons? I said, not only do I support it, I think we should use them. And he said, can I put you down for a don't know? I said, for that answer, you can.
Brilliant. It is amazing. My second one is one that I've been meaning to do for a while as well, because this is another story that's been hanging about for a while. It's from Scotland. Humza Yousaf, who is the Minister of Justice in Scotland, who is a guy who's becoming universally hated because he wants to bring in this hate speech law, right? Neil Oliver talks about this an awful lot. He actually tweeted out, because it became an issue, not just because they're trying to kind of control actors, artists, people who write books, people who are journalists, anything at all, if it's in any sort of context whatsoever, which is decided by this new law to be a hate crime, will be punishable by imprisonment, right? Now, it came up that if people were sitting around the dinner table, like in The Lives of Others, that movie about the Stasi that was made about East Germany, what would happen if you were to say something which might be considered to be in breach. He decided that it would be a good idea to explain this to people on his Twitter account by saying, why would you not want to prosecute somebody who was engaged in hate speech around his own dinner table with his friends,
How
right?
long you got?
So basically now the Scottish government, which is becoming more and more kind of dictator-like over the time that it's been in, will now want to basically have children grassing on their parents because they've heard them having a conversation that they think might be a bit dodgy. Can you imagine?
I think the thing that's so sinister about Humza Yousaf and the way that he talks about all of this stuff surrounding the hate crime bill is the way that he doesn't seem to compute why this is wrong. He doesn't seem to understand. He really seems to think that in order to, reach the Elysian fields of this, perfect utopian Scotland that he wants to achieve, where everyone loves each other and respects each other, that he's actually mandating.
He's obviously never been to a Rangers Celtic match.
Well, in reality, the Scotland he's imagining would be absolute hell.
Yeah.
Because you'd have children, ratting out their parents. Right. It would be.
William Wallace, a Braveheart, with a big blue face. You'll never take our freedom. Nicola Sturgeon, what a bet.
Yeah, right. We took it while you were at lunch.
We just did.
Yeah. But it is extraordinary, isn't it, that people who, this is more of a sort of a broader point that I've been making for a while now, is that devolution looks like the worst idea Tony Blair ever had.
And city
right?
mayors.
Well, yes. I include all of that.
Yeah.
I said this when Andy Burnham was kicking off about, how he was having a row with Boris Johnson. Seemingly he's the only guy that was.
By the way, demanding that we had less freedom than Boris wanted to give us.
But more money.
Yeah.
And the point about, the way that they've somehow devolved power, combination of Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron and George Osborne have completely messed up the way this country's governed. Mm-hmm. And they've practically made it ungovernable. Mark Drakeford I had down as a plank, right? But he's actually now looking more sensible than Boris Johnson.
Statesman-like, doesn't
he? This is the guy who was roping off supermarkets, right? Yeah. And the idea that he's now more sensible than our Prime Minister, and he's able to say things like, well, depending on what the Prime Minister says, we may have to set up, border patrols to stop people coming into Wales to escape the English lockdown. Yeah. What?
I love the Welsh system. You are no longer allowed to buy socks. That should beat COVID. Right. That should beat it.
Well, did you see? The great thing about Britain,
as good as arrows in pubs. That will beat COVID.
The new kind of mentality now, though, and the new mantra of ministers and of politicians on the side of lockdown is to say that, well, the thing is that, if we'd done what they did in Taiwan and Singapore and Indonesia, where they've got very few COVID cases, then we wouldn't be in this situation, right? And you go, well, hang on a minute. This is Britain, first of all. Second of all, nobody goes really to Taiwan to do anything unless you're going there to live or unless you're going there specifically for a reason. Everybody comes to London. Everybody comes through Britain. But the other thing is, when they banned clothing, as something you could buy as an essential item, some guy in Wales turned up in a supermarket in his underpants. And I thought, you see, that is the Britain that I want to live in.
Yeah.
This is the sort of thing that I want. The guy's going, well, I don't have to wear clothes. The
first non-essential item?
Yeah.
Non-essential. It's brilliant. And the police, I think, actually arrested him on the grounds that he wasn't wearing any clothes. And he pointed out, well, you can't arrest me because they're not essential items.
Did you see the Adam Bolton interview with Richard Tice? Where
I did.
He said,
I saw a clip of it.
Where he said, basically, well, if North Korea have got a great lockdown, if North Korea, what's good enough for North Korea is good enough for Adam Bolton.
I had to watch
and
it.
Probably Nicola Sturgeon as well.
I had to watch that a couple of times, and I thought, surely to God, somebody's overdubbed this. That he couldn't have actually said that on live television. But don't worry, because nobody's watching. Because they're all watching my show.
Sky
they're all
News
watching Talk Radio. They're not watching Ellen
about
Bolton.
20,000 Sky News. No, seriously, but Kay Burley's 90,000 viewers, and that's the flagship show, breakfast show.
Well,
Nobody watches Sky News because it's useless.
There was a show recently, a new show. I think it was on Channel 4. And
this
it was
is your favourite woman, isn't it?
daytime show that had zero viewers.
Packed lunch.
Steph McGovern.
Yes.
She's great.
Actually, you know what? Because it was.
I love it. I love it. That's what she does.
The
for
UK,
90 minutes every day.
When she used to be on BBC Breakfast doing the business show, or the business commentary and stuff, and she used to have this great way of saying the UK. Now, I don't want to make fun of people from Hartlepool, which is where she's from. The UK is now something I just say. Whenever I see the word UK, I just say it like that. But actually, I'm not going to say I was bored in the Isle of Wight because my family will kill me, although they don't bother watching anything that I do. But we were, because it was horrible, terrible weather, and in between,
it looked great. I saw the
it was
pictures.
great fun actually. But we had this beautiful big house and a lovely big living room. And at one point or other, we were having lunch, I guess, in the house, and I put it on, and it came on this show, this Steph show.
I love it.
And she had a whole sort of mixture, sort of ragtag bag of guests, none of whom I'd ever heard of.
And it's
right?
like the studio is like some sort of decaying Starbucks. You know? It is.
But they would talk, but instead of having a sort of little conversation around something, they were talking about the American election.
Yeah.
And all these bozos were on the show, none of whom knew anything about it, clearly, and none of whom really had an opinion. Yeah. And then they did it for sort of about 5 minutes, and then she went, now, let's talk about tattoos. And you're kind of going, you've gone from
she's on
Donald
a different
Trump
planet.
to tattoos. Really?
Ali Ross wrote in The Sun, this brilliant column, wrote about she had this sort of doctor on, and she had this question of the day, and she said to him, what's the worst excuse you've ever given for not having sex?
What?
This guy was on for something completely different.
Yeah.
And he just went, I don't know.
Tremendous interview.
I love it.
Well done. It goes all
Actually, we
across
should
the
have done
UK.
Steph McGovern is a Plank of the Week honorary.
She should be in there. Yeah, we might have to do it before the end of the year.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned Adam Bolton. Is he going to figure in your planks, or are you giving him a miss?
My third plank.
Well, he gets an honourable mention, so that's good.
Yeah. Oh, he should definitely be an honorary plank this week. There are just too many to keep on the list.
Yeah.
So my third is Sam Smith.
Oh, yes.
He's making a comeback. I'm sure he's been on plank before. He must have been.
Do you know, I think he was on Plank of the Week when he made his tearful plea from inside of his mansion in the first lockdown.
This is more of the same.
Ah.
So I haven't included him because the content of what he said is plankish as such. You might say that it is. But more because of his just constant public emoting. Twice this week he's been in the news for his constant attention seeking,
right.
And in a way I'm slightly worried that he might be unwell,
right.
Because he's constantly talking about his feelings.
Yeah.
If you read some of the quotes quoted in the
Are you,
the Daily
by the
Mail,
way, misgendering him, because you don't have to call him
of course,
they.
they.
As well.
He's they.
Isn't he they?
Well,
He's they.
actually, so this features one of the reasons why he's in the list of planks, because he said that that he was talking about his struggles with people getting pronouns wrong.
Yeah.
And he said
That's
that this is going to take time, because he said we're trying to change the language.
Really?
So he was earlier in the week.
I've got some language for you. It's bad.
So earlier, I'm going to say he or they, who knows. So earlier last week, he came out saying that he wants to be a mummy by the time he's 35.
What you mean, like in the British Museum?
Egyptian, I hope.
I'm sure a couple of people can volunteer to bandage him up.
He's popping off to Egypt
okay.
for a long trip.
Into the pyramids with you.
So he wants to be a mummy by the time he's 35.
Is he going to have a womb sort of inserted or something?
So then he has come out, pardon the pun, saying that he'd already been talking about how he was feeling exhausted trying to find a boyfriend, and now he's saying that he's all whiny.
Yeah,
it's probably because he's such a whinger that no one wants to be around him because it's unpleasant. But
it can't be that difficult to find a boyfriend if you're a millionaire.
Now he's opening the market. He's saying he's willing to date anyone of any gender because he's obviously getting a little bit desperate.
Okay. Is he lonely?
Well, it's sounding like he is.
Wow.
And so I've put him in this week because he just will not stop crying.
I would say that I'd be very prepared to do a deal with Sam Smith, that he could whinge on and whine in the irritating way that you're saying, ad infinitum, forevermore, as long as he agrees not to sing. Because when he sings, God almighty, I mean, talk about whiny singer. He's a moany, horrible singer. His voice is really vile.
It's not great, is it?
But
really, luckily, I'm amazed. This has all passed me by completely. I must be doing the right thing, because I didn't even know any of this news at all.
In fairness, though, he doesn't make a bad beer. It's quite nice.
That is a nice beer. It is. The dark one's a bit too strong for me, but
it's not bad. So he should stick to beer brewing.
Perhaps we should lock him in a room with Femi, and they can whinge on together for
there
eternity.
Imagine, maybe they could get married.
There's a relationship made in hell.
Do you take this they person to be your lawful wedded they person?
Yes,
they
absolutely.
do. What?
I know. I mean, hopefully we emerge from all of this at some point. But I think the fact that we're in this kind of bizarre in and out of lockdown doesn't help. And it really, because people start thinking about stuff, coming out with nonsense, making out that, I mean, there are genuinely people suffering from the fact that they haven't got a job. I spoke to a guy today who was a taxi driver who said that lots of his mates have just given up on taxi driving. They can't do it anymore. It's too stressful. They can't afford it. They can't feed their families. Some of them have had to get other jobs. Others have just become totally depressed. And I think it's actually quite ridiculous for somebody of his wealth. And I know that you can still suffer from depression even if you're rich. It's not the point. But he doesn't need to whine about it when, you know, it's a sort of touch of the Meghan Markles, you know, almost unsurvivable.
It's very cloth-eared of him.
Well, they call it, do they not call it tone deaf?
Yeah, tone deaf.
In the woke world.
Well,
so he's tone deaf, actually, but because he's Sam Smith and because he's misgendered and because he's so open about his, you know, problems, somehow that's all right.
Well,
but actually, it's not all right.
Another tone deaf emoter this week was Lily Allen.
Oh, yeah.
Because she did this whole, and the BBC
this
covered
sex
it.
Toys thing,
She has a line of sex toys coming out, and she did this whole piece. The BBC reported on it. It was basically an ad for her brand.
It was.
Yeah. But they, so she was saying that she thinks that women should be more open and less guilty about these things, and we should all talk publicly about why. Why?
Why? But
no one wants to hear about it.
But also, two, she's talking absolute rubbish anyway, because I don't know many women who wouldn't be particularly open about it if they wanted to be. It's not like anyone's stopping you. You know, if you want to talk about it, it's just not something you do, generally speaking, on Plank of the Week, or you don't suddenly come on the radio and go, do you want me to tell you about how I masturbate? And you go, well, not really, no, actually.
But it's a cynical attempt to flog her news
What I found worse about all of that,
what
I found worse about all of that was on the BBC website, which because it was reported on Newsround, right? They actually then had a link to a website in which it showed you how to have various different forms of masturbating, and you just think, well, really, this is a kids' BBC, website, and you're linking it to this place. It's just the world has gone completely bonkers.
But it's so tone deaf and whingy, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's blue, but it's not Peter.
I've got a sex toy here I made earlier.
Yeah. Just paint your name on it. I mean, you know, it's just bizarre.
Celibate, sticky back plastic.
But this is the thing where you go, you know, but that's okay though. But that's fine. You know, but if you say Marcus Rashford's not a very nice guy, you'll get absolutely slaughtered.
Well, I didn't say he wasn't a very nice guy. I want to make that caveat.
No, of course you didn't say that. Absolutely not. Who's your third one then?
Well, I was going to go for BBC virtue signallers. But in a minute I will cite a particular individual that I'm going to nominate as Plank of the Week. But if you noticed that when the new Director General Tim Davie ordained that BBC journalists would have to be careful with their tweets, and he actually said, I don't want you virtue signalling about your politics and all that. Now it was the virtue signalling bit that got them furious, because to tell BBC journalists that they're not allowed to advertise their fabulous left-leaning wonderfulness is a dagger through their self-regarding hearts. It really is. I can't tell everyone how wonderful I am, and all my friends in Hampstead and Islington are wonderful too, because we're for Remain and we don't like Donald Trump.
And we're nice people.
Surely I could tweet that.
And we're nice people.
Anyway, yeah, we are nice people.
We're nice people, and they're horrid. All those horrible right-wingers horrid.
But I'm going to cite...
Horrid.
So there was this huge uprising from these furious virtue signallers of the BBC. Don't tell us we can't virtue signal, please. Anyway, there's a... I know you'll have heard of this guy. He's very much a household name in his own house. His name is James Wong. He's a gardener on Gardener's Question Time.
Knows he?
And he said he's making some incredibly tedious programme for the BBC World Service about potting plants or something. And he said, I assume since I'm making a programme for the World Service about pot plants, then I'm included in this diktat. Well, I have no intention of obeying it one bit, because virtue signalling is a term invented by the alt-right. No, it's not.
Oh dear.
No, it's not.
Right.
So James Wong...
Did he get fired?
James Wong... No, well, of course, what would be great would be if so loads of them did it. There was a guy off the BBC News desk, a guy called Henderson, started tweeting the same, I will not be told what I can and cannot tweet. I'd love for Tim Davie to go around and say, are you that Henderson guy?
Yeah, you're out.
Where's your P45?
Yeah.
Hey, Wong, your gardening programme is off.
Right.
Yeah, you've dug yourself a hole. It's too deep. You can't get out. So James Wong, the man who thinks virtue signalling is a term invented by the alt-right to demonise lovely people like him. By the way, James, it's not. not. James Wong is my plank of the week.
Yeah, well, I think that probably covers an awful lot of people as well. I see
Yes, he's the symbol.
Gary Lineker, who was in it last week, also made a kind of what you might call clever reaction to it by putting out something about Trump, which said, I think it was about Trump, but it said something like, this man is completely crazy. But for balance, I'll just say he's completely sane. It was one of those. So it's like there's obviously going to be a lot of this kind of stuff going on.
By the way, but on Lineker, right? So suddenly, he did take in a refugee for about 3 days, and was very, very diligent about letting us all know, wasn't he? Look, here's a letter he wrote. Look, he says how great I was, and how brilliant I am. Yes, I mean, these people virtue signalling is a disease.
People did cast some aspersions on the letter because the guy managed to put in the letter, I was worried you might be very conservative.
Yeah.
Why would you write that?
Yeah, Gary,
why would you write that?
We want a picture of this guy. We're beginning to doubt he even exists.
Why would you worry?
Yeah.
My third one is going to be Keir Starmer, and again, you might accuse me of going slightly back into last week.
The cyclist friend.
But I mean, it could only happen to me, right? I take a week off, first week of the year. Keir Starmer runs over a cyclist in his SUV.
Shouldn't laugh.
Right, and apparently the cyclist's fine, so you could laugh. It's all right. And then he kicks Jeremy Corbyn out of the party after discovering that the party that he was in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet with was apparently anti-Semitic, even though Shami Chakrabarti had already done an investigation and told him that it wasn't. So poor old Keir, right? I mean, he's being banged from pillar to post. He doesn't know which end is up. 1 minute he's working for Jeremy Corbyn and hugging him and sort of promoting him and saying he should be the next Prime Minister. Now he's thrown him under the bus. I don't know what's going on.
Cynical Sir Comrade.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, he said, I was shocked when I read the Equalities and Human Rights Commission report.
Yeah.
Why were you shocked? You were there.
Well, exactly.
You were there.
And he claimed in an interview, did he not, that he tried his best to kind of highlight what the problems were, but he wasn't really gaining any traction. If
the Tories were any good, and they're not, but if they were, they'd be making a lot of play out of the fact that tough, hard-line Keir, the man who won't stand for anti-Semitism, and had I mean, fair play, I was quite impressed that he suspended Corbyn. But 1 year ago, he was saying that this man, Corbyn, who I've just kicked out of the party, he should be your Prime Minister.
Yeah. Not only that should he be the Prime Minister, but that he was a man of great vision, that he was one of the nicest and kindest men that he'd ever seen. He repeatedly trotted out this nonsense that, he's never been more smeared than any other politician in the history of politics. Yeah. I mean, he was an enthusiastic backer of Corbyn's. It wasn't like he was a reluctant kind of fellow traveller.
What have the Tories done about that? Nothing. You haven't heard a word from them.
They haven't made any capital.
They could make so much capital out of that.
Yeah.
It probably says an awful lot about the current status of Labour that they haven't even bothered to, because did Keir Starmer even exist in our political discussion aside from this?
I mean, but the thing that I suppose pleases me about this is that at least people have stopped going on about how brilliant Keir Starmer is, because I never thought he was brilliant. I always thought he was dull, uninteresting, unimaginative, very unpersuasive in terms of what he wants from the country. And all he seems to do up to now is go along with what the government says and say that they should have done it earlier. Yeah, that's all he says.
He's going to kick Corbyn out as well.
I hope so.
Because he's had a very good reaction to it so far. Went up 5% in the polls. He's now 5% ahead of the Tories.
Except that, you've got all these maniacs like John McDonnell, Diane Abbott, and a collection of others who say he must be reinstated immediately.
Yeah, but if you read into it, Len McCluskey started like that and then got more and more moderate. Yeah, they've read the rooms. Yeah, but I'd like to see them.
I'd like to see them splitting the Labour Party. I'd love to see them split the Labour Party, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't think it will split the Labour Party. I think Keir Starmer and Len McCluskey and John McDonnell, they suddenly realised, wait a minute, Corbyn's over, and actually the public are very keen on a party that kicks Jeremy Corbyn out. Starmer will do it because it'll get him votes.
Well, listen, we've come to the end of our 9 nominations. I will carry one over from last week, which might just be Sadiq Khan. You never know. Old Harry and Meghan have been quiet this week, haven't they? Although she was quite noisy last week.
Yes,
so we'll have a look.
That's another thing you missed.
Yeah, I know. Unbelievable. So here's what we do now. You might remember this from the last time. We try and whittle it down to one each. So I'm going to kick it off this time, and I'm going to choose my favourite one of Kevin's. He can choose yours, and you can choose mine. Is that good? Yep. So give us your 3 again.
Marcus Rashford, epidemiologists, James
Mr.
Wong and the virtue signallers.
Yes, I think it has to be the epidemiologists, doesn't it? Because it's because of them that in 2 days from now we're all about to be locked down again.
Yeah.
Unless of course, there was a story today, I think in the Telegraph, saying that the R rate has gone below 1. But I can't see them changing anything. So I think the epidemiologist. So do you want to choose?
Remind me, Emma, again.
Erdogan, Femi, and Sam Smith.
Sam Smith.
You've broken my heart.
Sam Smith.
Not Erdogan.
And my 3. So to pick one of these: Hamza Yusuf, Sacha Baron Cohen, and Keir
Hamza
Starmer.
Yusuf.
Hamza Yusuf, he deserves it.
Don't even need to think about it.
Okay, very, very quickly drawn that one. So Hamza Yusuf, Sam Smith, and the epidemiologist. So what do you reckon?
Well, I'm going for epidemiologists.
Yeah,
these are the people that's got us.
They really, I mean, that is, I suppose,
and they continue to build their wrong models.
The biggest wrong modelling of the week.
Yeah, wrong modeler of the week. Yeah.
You wouldn't ever want them to design you a house, would you?
Exactly.
Yeah, if you look like something painted by Picasso.
If you gave them an Airfix kit, the wings would all be in the wrong place. Cockpit would be underneath.
But they'll tell you, but it'll be all right in about 6 months. And they'll give it in the right
it's not a prediction; it's a scenario.
Yeah.
What?
I know. They've reinvented the English language. I think it's got to be epidemiologist, isn't it?
Yeah, fine for me. Yeah.
So epidemiologist, that's the one. Well, thank you guys. Epidemiologist, plank of the week. Don't forget, if you haven't done it, what you need to do is subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you'll see all the other great stuff that we do every single week. And we'll also be doing a Plank of the Year show coming up towards the end of December, if we're still allowed into the studio here, which of course we may not be. This has been Plank of the Week. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Kevin. We'll see you next week.